You've probably been told to manage your blood sugar. You should pair your carbs with fat or protein. Maybe add some peanut butter to your toast, cheese to your sandwich, or even throw butter into your coffee. But what if I told you that this advice could actually backfire? That fat, especially the wrong kind, can raise your blood sugar even more than sugar alone. Surprise? Today we're going to expose 10 popular foods that might be destroying your blood sugar balance. And we'll show you exactly what to eat instead. We're going to ease into the science and explain the real problem. That the problem isn't just sugar. It's the dangerous mix of sugar and fat that hijacks your metabolism. And when you eat sugar alone, your body will naturally spike insulin. It clears the sugars and you usually move on. But when fat is present, especially saturated fats, trans fats, or processed fats, it really slows down digestion. It impairs insulin sensitivity and it leads to higher and longer lasting blood sugar spikes after you eat carbohydrates, especially after you eat rice and bakery items. Now, why? It's because the fat blocks your glucose transport into your cells, especially your muscle cells. If they don't work, your sugars remain high. Your muscle cells are your largest glucose storage closets, filled with insulin receptors waiting to receive that glucose. But fat, it clogs up the insulin receptors, making your body pump out more insulin to do the same job. Insulin then talks to your fat cells to make your fat cells bigger. So if you want to gain weight, add more fat to your food. That's what pediatricians tell parents when their children are struggling to gain weight. I used to do that with my toddler because he was underweight. And back then, my pediatrician literally told me to add more fat and carbs. That's how it works. And at the mitochondrial level, saturated fats like palmitic acid creates more oxidative stress. It damages the very engines that burn sugar. So not only is glucose from your pastries, your bread, your rice not getting into your cells efficiently, it's also not being burned properly when it does get in. And the result, sugar builds up in your blood. You have no energy. Your fat then builds up in your organs. Now, we are feeding our overweight children a ton of fat and carbs because as parents, frankly, we like to eat them ourselves. So it's important to know the 10 common foods that create this perfect storm and how you can easily upgrade them to lower your blood sugars, to lower your insulin, and to lower your fat stores. Transform your body. Number 1 are biscuits. What's the problem with biscuits? Refined white flour, which is essentially sugar. Then you got butter. So you got sugar and saturated fat. And the effect is a rapid spike in blood sugar, impaired insulin response, and persistent high blood sugars. Have you ever thought about those pre-made biscuits? The ones that you roll out in a tube? Those things are loaded with trans fats and preservatives. And I too used to think they were fun. They were easy for my kids to do. But in reality, we need to teach them to have fun in other ways, not at the expense of their health and not to help them build lifelong poor dietary habits. Now, I've never seen a biscuit made out of whole wheat flour. And honestly, even if they did change the flour, it wouldn't be much healthier because of all that butter. But whole wheat is actually better than refined flour. It gives you some fiber. Along with the fiber comes antioxidants. It also has spermidine, which is a longevity vitamin. I actually go out of my way to eat spermidine every day. It's in wheat germ, which is not in white refined flour. But whole wheat flour does have it. It also has other vitamins and minerals that white flour just won't have. That's because they process it out and threw it away. Health is not just about having perfect blood sugars and low insulin numbers or to look good in a dress and to be at a certain weight. You should be at a certain weight because it's healthy for you, not because you look good in it. And when you get healthy, then you will have good blood sugars and you will have lower insulin levels and you will have health. Because just because you have low blood sugars and low insulin doesn't mean you're going to outlive the guy who eats the right diversity of foods in the right amount. I mean, if you think about it, lions should have the perfect blood sugars, right? And insulin levels. But elephants, they eat a ton of vegetation. They're not only bigger and stronger, they're smarter than lions. They live longer than lions. Health is about getting your nutrients right so that you can be as healthy as an elephant, not as healthy as a lion. Hence, better options are whole grain breads with no added oils, or add avocado for your fat if you want to eat some fat, and then add some balsamic dipped tomatoes for flavor without the damaged saturated fat. Which, number 2, butter and toast is the same problem. Now, butter is high in saturated fat and your bread, your toast spikes sugar. There's really no difference between white butter toast and a biscuit except for texture. They're both just as metabolically unhealthy together. It's essentially a biscuit separated. On a biochemical level, butter inhibits complex 1 of the mitochondria. It reduces ATP output and it increases reactive oxygen species. A better alternative would be a whole grain bread dipped in vinegar. Vinegar slows gastric emptying and improves insulin sensitivity because of acetic acid, the main compound in vinegar, which slows gastric emptying and reduces starch digestion, leading to smaller post-meal glucose and insulin surges. Studies show consuming vinegar with meals can increase fullness for up to 120 minutes, which can reduce calorie intake. Animal and in vitro research suggests acetic acid can increase the expression of PPAR alpha, an enzyme tied to fatty acid oxidation. Now, these processes are often mediated by cyclic AMP, the second messenger system, promoting energy use over storage. That means you lose weight. In fact, studies have shown that you actually lose a little bit of weight if you start adding vinegar to your food every day. A famous Japanese randomized controlled trial found obese adults adding 15 to 30 milliliters of vinegar a day lost 2 to 4 pounds over 12 weeks. And they also dropped their body fat and triglyceride levels. Now that's roughly 2 tablespoons with your meals. A 2024 Lebanese study reported reduction in weight, body mass index, weight circumference, blood glucose, triglycerides, and cholesterol in overweight individuals after 12 weeks of daily vinegar. Now, of course, we're not talking about massive weight loss. We have to be realistic. These studies show about 0.7 kilograms of an additional weight loss over 12 weeks, which is 1.5 pounds. Most trials are small. Notice that how they're out of this country. They're short term and they use dietary changes alongside vinegar intake. Now, there are lots of people who want to just drink vinegar. And what's wrong with that? Well, start number 1. If you want to have bad teeth, drink vinegar. It'll erode your dental enamel. It will irritate your throat and it can reduce your potassium levels. It may also interact with medications like insulin or diuretics. And it can have supplement interactions with licorice and horsetail. So really don't make any dietary changes until you speak with your own personal prescriber. So number 3 also involves toast or untoasted bread, basically a peanut butter sandwich. Now, what's the problem with peanut butter? Well, have you read the ingredients? A lot of them have hydrogenated oils and trans fats that damage insulin receptors. So you can upgrade that by eating plain roasted peanuts, or you can make your own nut butter, just pure peanuts, right? Just blend that in a blender or a food processor. You can combine that with apple slices or a few celery sticks so that you can eat whole, low-calorie foods that give you that crunchy texture. When you eat whole foods, you spend more time chewing. We have forgotten how to chew our food. All these processed foods that just melt in your mouth, they require so little chewing that you don't have time to release your satiety hormones to get you to stop eating junk food. The more you chew, the less food you actually eat. Hence, processed foods usually are soft, smooth, kind of melts in your mouth, crumbles in your mouth, right? Think about it. Buttered biscuits, toasted peanut butter sandwiches. These foods require very little chewing. These days, breads are so soft you can almost inhale it. These chemicals, they hijack your taste receptors, your brain, to get you to crave more. So that brings us to another bread thing, ham and cheese sandwich. And what's the problem now? Well, ham is a processed meat. Cheese, that's saturated fat. So you got a processed meat with nitrates. Now you have saturated fat from the meat and the saturated fat from the cheese. They're both low in saturated fat. And then you slap it in between 2 pieces of white bread, low in fiber, and it's essentially sugar. You're better off using a whole grain bread. Skipping that ham, avoid American cheese, and load up with arugula, cucumber, and hummus for a delicious sauce with protein and fiber and anti-inflammatory nutrients. Talk about reducing inflammation. Millions of people just pack on inflammation with every piece of pizza that they eat, right? Pizza, America's favorite dinner. That white flour crust, fatty cheese. Well, you're going to get a post-meal glucose elevation for hours. Now, of course, it's better to make your pizza with a whole grain crust. Add some nuts and flax seeds, and don't use cheese, don't use starch. Add tomato sauce and mushrooms, spinach, onions, and just a light sprinkle of a good quality cheese if you really need to eat cheese. When I went to Italy, I noticed that their cheese pizzas aren't caked on with cheese. Cheese is essentially kind of like, sprinkling your onions. Because when you eat cheese, you're essentially eating concentrated saturated fat. And if you want to damage your mitochondria's ability to process that carbohydrate, that pie crust, or your pizza crust, then keep on eating saturated fat. It will destroy your ability to metabolize your glucose. When fats, especially saturated ones, enter in cells in excess, they produce ceramides and acylcarnitines, which inhibit insulin signaling. Mitochondria become sluggish. Think of it like pouring grease into your car engine. It burns poorly and it gums up the works. This is why studies show people who eat high-fat diets have significantly higher blood sugars after eating carbohydrates, even if you kept the carbs the same. So foods that are both high in saturated fat and carbohydrates will synergistically cause more damage to your mitochondria. And number 6, lasagna is no exception. So what's lasagna? Well, you got a layer of white pasta, which turns into pure sugar. Then you got a layer of ground meat, which is worse because it also inhibits your metabolism. By ground meat, it releases saturated fat even quicker than if you kept that meat whole. I mean, ground meat, you don't even have to chew much, right? And then you now add cheese. So you got full fat with more fat. You're essentially eating a highly processed fat on top of highly processed refined sugar or flour that turns into sugar. There's no fiber. You got a ton of fat and carbs. And then you feel it after you eat. Your gut feels heavy and you may even go into a food coma. You would do so much better replacing that white pasta with a whole grain pasta. And how about layering your food with fiber-rich, low-carb foods such as sliced eggplants and sliced zucchini. You can also replace some of that meat and cheese with blended beans, crumbled tofu, nutritional yeast, minced mushrooms to get that umami flavor, that depth of flavor that makes your food taste good. And this avoids that bad glucose disaster. Unlike number 7, Alfredo noodles. Again, the problem is the cream sauce loaded with saturated fat, no fiber. The pasta is fiberless, is made out of white flour. It would be so much better to use a whole grain pasta tossed with cashew cream sauce and steamed broccoli. You add lemon, you add garlic, nutritional yeast for flavor. And number 8 may surprise you, spaghetti and meat sauce. Now, I just talked about lasagna, and pretty much a meat sauce is just crumbled up lasagna meat, right? It's probably healthier than the lasagna because you have less cheese. However, you still have the basic problem, saturated fat from red meat, then you got the white starchy pasta. And you may think, well, it's good. Protein helps to make your sugars better. Well, it doesn't elevate the blood sugar if you don't eat any carbs, but it still elevates insulin. And eventually it does elevate your blood sugar if you eat carbohydrates. But it's not as bad as fat. Believe it or not, protein by itself without the fat will still raise your blood sugars higher than if you just ate sugar alone.
Hi friends, I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
And this is why when you overeat protein, you also struggle with controlling your blood sugars if you eat carbohydrates. Now remember, we're talking about eating a mixed diet. If you want to just eat fat or you just eat protein, and of course your blood sugars will be lower because you're not eating carbohydrates. Your body also doesn't store much sugar, so after you use it all, it's not like it's constantly releasing a bunch of it. You have to have a reason to release it, but first you have to have that storage to get some. But if you're going to eat a mixed diet and eat carbohydrates, which turns into sugar, then you need to realize that when you mix other macronutrients like fat and protein, you will increase your insulin demand. Then you will slow down your digestion and you will continue to struggle with controlling your blood sugars and insulin levels. This translates into difficulty losing weight. You would be better off to replace some of that animal protein with plant proteins like lentils and beans. You can sprout your lentils and beans to make them more easily digestible. You can try to find substitutes for that texture in the plant kingdom, like with jackfruit. Or you can use, black beans in your sauce to make your sauce creamy without the added saturated fat. Change your white refined pasta noodles to whole grain noodles. Better yet, make it a bean noodle, like a chickpea noodle or a lentil noodle. And then you mix it with spiralized squash for extra fiber. That would be delish. Now let's be clear, fat isn't evil. It's the type, the amount, and the context that matters. In nature, fat usually comes with fiber and phytonutrients, like in nuts, seeds, and avocados. You're not going to go in nature and find milk, cheese, ice cream. These are all man-made processed foods. Modern-day processed fats, like bacon grease, butter, tallow, and seed and fruit oils, they are acting like metabolic landmines when you pair it with sugar or starch. This pairing promotes insulin resistance, fat storage, and inflammation. However, if you're going to eat some fat, because I do know people want to eat that texture, it tastes good. The best fat of everything I listed would be a fat with more polyunsaturated fats or omega-3 fats like fish oil or algae oil. But nobody cooks with fish oil, right? I mean, it's too fishy. But they do take fish oil supplements. And that's okay. You really need to get your essential oils. And if you're a diet that doesn't eat fish, then you just have to take algae oils as a supplement. Because essential fats are non-negotiable. Omega-3 fats are essential. And we as a nation are lacking. And the next best fats behind polyunsaturated would be monounsaturated fats, like plant-based fats. And we'll talk about that later. Number 9 is steak and potatoes. And what's the problem with that? Well, it's saturated fat in the steak, red meat, and, carbohydrates in the potatoes. This just delays and prolongs your insulin. Which one is worse, red meat or potatoes when it comes to getting diabetes? Believe it or not, it's red meat. It actually increases your risk of getting diabetes and cancer. Red meat is also actually a big choking hazard. And I know a lot of people who think I'm off my rockers because people have been eating red meat for eons. Well, did they eat bread with that red meat? At the rate that we're eating red meat with our processed grains and our processed fats and oils, I don't think they had all this back then. Really, did they have an abundance of food? And did these people live long? How long do you think the caveman lived? I'd be surprised if they made it to their 30s. What do you think would get them? Probably the exact animal that they were trying to get, or an infectious disease. So if your goal is to make it to your 30s, then pretty much you can eat whatever you want. The human body is designed to live up to 30. But if your goal is to make it past 30s, healthy into your 40s, and healthy into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, then you're going to have to put more effort and have to figure out how to reverse the oxidative damage that's been accumulating since the day that you were born so that you can make it healthy, upright, and not tethered to the medical system in your 70s and 80s and maybe your 90s. Would it be nice if you were in your 80s and you had the same quality of life that you did in your 40s and 50s? Well, if that's what you want, you're going to have to put in more homework and thought than to copy what cavemen used to eat. Now, some of you have commented that you don't believe I'm a real practicing doctor. You can look me up. My medical license is in the state of California. And I appreciate every day as if it's my last day because I've been a physician for about almost 3 decades, witnessing suffering and death. That's not an easy career path. And unfortunately, if you need to see an infectious disease doctor, you're really not having a foo-foo cosmetic problem. You're having a real life-threatening health crisis. But these health crises, they don't happen in mid-air. You don't get it from bad luck. You may get it from bad air, but not from bad luck. It's a lifetime of neglected abuse of your vessel. You are given one vessel. And if you break it, well, there are no replacement parts for most people. And oftentimes the replacement parts, like somebody else's organs, they don't work like the original. Unfortunately, not everybody is given normal, perfectly working parts. This weekend, I met someone who is handicapped, disfigured in his arms from birth. But that didn't stop him. The person was living out his dreams and embracing his life. Now, can you imagine not having your fingers and your toes? Some people are born like that. But honestly, most people lose them because they don't take care of their blood vessels. And what breaks down your blood vessels? Well, high blood sugar levels, high fat levels, and the combination of both will increase your insulin levels. That will break down your blood vessels too. And the wrong fats will lead to high cholesterol levels, high triglyceride levels, basically high inflammation with all these energy molecules. They break down your blood vessels so that you cannot get nutrients to your furthest blood vessel, which is in your toes. If you want to keep healthy toes so that they're not numb and impair you from walking, running, and embracing life, then you may want to consider making better food choices, switching yams and sweet potatoes for white potatoes, eating leaner cuts of meat and eating less meat. Meat should not be an everyday food, but you can eat some of it. Just you can't eat it every day because it's highly inflammatory. And on top of that, diversity is a key. In diversity, you don't collect any one toxin, you also reduce inflammation. And part of that is to eat enough leafy greens, dark leafy greens. Fill your plate with it. It should be your main dish. Berries are also anti-inflammatory. And if you're going to eat red meat, you should eat those 2 items at the very minimum alongside your red meat. Now, number 10 is really the standard American diet that has a combo meal effect. Even if your food is in terrible alone, the combo is what breaks your metabolism. But in America, we make it easy to break your metabolism because we combine these foods that are terrible. French French fries are a terrible food. Fat and sugar. That's not much different than a donut. Fat and sugar. Fat slows down sugar response. And yes, fat delays gastric emptying time, but it also makes a bigger, more prolonged sugar rise. The body interprets this as chaos and struggles to cope. And instead of teaching this, processed food companies embrace this metabolic chaos to create even more deliciously, wonderfully, beautiful looking fat and carb combos. And then you got social media influencers that tell you half the story. And they put down the carbs and they just eat the fat and say that they are insulin sensitive. Or they put down the carbs and they just eat protein. Or better yet, they eat carbs with protein or they eat carbs with fat. Now you can do all these things, but you're really making the problem worse. And why are they trying to sell you a sugar controlling supplement? How is that any different than a sugar controlling prescription? Which one would you feel safer if you know all the side effects? Prescription drugs actually go through rigorous trials tested by thousands of patients. So we've been prescribing them for decades and we know most of what will happen, right? The side effects are clearly outlined. And we know what happens in the end if you don't change your diet. Your metabolism wakes up and one day it develops tolerance to that prescription medication. So the same diet now, you won't be able to handle that sugar or carbohydrate. You'll spike your insulin higher and you'll need more and more prescriptions to control your blood sugars. These supplements are pretending to be medications, fooling you that you can continue to eat your diet, feed your addiction, and you'll still be okay. Really? Is your body that stupid? I don't think so. We all know we feel bad after eating the multi-trillion-dollar processed foods, and then we have to take a drug for my multi-billion-dollar prescriptions. You can fool your mind, but you can't fool your metabolism. And ultimately, these supplements, they won't be able to fool your body either. Now, we're getting exposed to AI technology. It's supposed to replace our jobs, make our lives easier, but can it ever replace your body? There's no AI technology that can give you a new liver, give you a new pancreas, help you grow muscles. These organs all help you control your blood sugar and your insulin. You have to do the caveman work to fix it. These are the key organs for your metabolism. And the organelle responsible for your metabolism is your mitochondria. There's no AI technology that can give you new mitochondria. And there are no mitochondria organelle transplants. The beauty is the mitochondria divides on its own. And did you know that your mom gave you your mitochondria and that she got it from her great-grandmother and she got it from your great-great-grandmother? Your mitochondria has been in existence for thousands of years. And in fact, it is believed that the human mitochondria is billions of years old. Think about that. Inside of you is a part of ancient history. It's perfectly made for you to be a metabolic powerhouse that can never be replaced by any AI, anything man-made, period. And if you figure out how to support your mitochondria's health, you will unlock the key to longevity. Believe me, I'm not in the mission to defy passing away. That's impossible. We have 2 guarantees in life. Everybody is born and everyone goes. But the journey to get from one end to the other is what makes all of us unique. It's not our labels. Do you want your journey to be filled with labels of sickness and suffering? Or do you want your journey to be full of health and joy? If you are in the latter, then it's important for you to invest in yourself, invest in your health. So this way you can weed out the nutritional myths on social media. Starting with the first one, the myth that fat protects you from sugar spikes. It's just that, a myth. The truth is eating clean, whole carbs with intact original fiber, not fiber supplements and not mineral supplements. It is a much better barrier for blood sugar control and to lower your insulin than the fatty, low-carb meals where you're told what to eat. We are turning into a nation of carbophobic critics, and instead of fearing carbs, how about we learn how to eat the right carbs and avoid the wrong carbs? Don't lump them together, and learn how to eat the right amount in the right way. It's important to keep your dietary fats in check if you want to eat carbs. Now stick to whole food fiber-rich sources for your carbs. Keep your carbs unprocessed. And remember, don't banish beans or whole grains. Add some vinegar to your greens, to your everyday meal. And don't fear fruit. Nature packaged it perfectly. They are full of fiber and antioxidants and hydration, and it makes you chew. Now it's important to eat a diversity, including your nuts and seeds. They are very healthy fat source when kept whole. But I know it's hard to cook without pure fats and oils, and I said that I would talk more in detail about that to help you choose the best cooking oil. And this video would be so much longer if I told you now. And if you found this video helpful, then you're going to find even more surprising, healthful information on how to pick a better oil in the next video.